All right, I gave this out the other day, and yesterday we went over we did the written test, I should say, on Chapter 5, and then we went through several examples from Chapter 3 and for Chapter 4. Today we're going to go through some DOM examples as a class, just so you see this. You were sent an email this morning that's got a folder in it called DOM exercises. We're going to do that second, but we will go through that. So if you would take that and copy it over to your, copy that over to your desktop or wherever you happen to put these things. All right. We're going to go through this first, and I'll go through that in just a second. Remember that tomorrow then will be a lab for the entire period. All right. Not going to talk, not going to do anything. On Monday, I'm going to go over the test. So if any of you, I have not received word back from Jeremy, so worst case scenario, and maybe that's a best case scenario, I don't know. The test is open book and open notes, so you can just take it in here if you want to do that. That's fine. But I will talk to Jeremy because they have a testing station over there in the other building. It's quieter. I just thought that might be easier for you. But on Monday of next week, I'm going to go over the way that I did the test, and that'll probably take a good hour. I don't know if it'll take more, if it'll take less than that. And then I'm going to go over Chapter 6. All right. Then on Tuesday, the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to look at 2 or 3 different versions. One of them, at least, I'll give you. If you remember earlier this semester, we did a thing with the where I gave you an example. Actually, I think we probably went through several examples of a miles per gallon program when we started JavaScript. We're going to do that, but we're going to bump it up or whatever you'd call it, because we're going to take that and we're going to put that into a form. All right. And after we put that into a form, we're going to be able to manipulate what's in there using JavaScript. So we're going to do that on Tuesday. Then whatever time is left, we'll again go over a couple of examples from Chapter 5 and a couple examples from Chapter 6. All right. As far as the work for Chapter, ideally you're going to have everything through Chapter 5 in by a week from today. Remember that next Thursday, next Friday, that's the Thanksgiving break. So, of course, there won't be any class. All right. Then once we get done with that, the following week, that Monday will be lab for the entire period. All right, just lab. Always like to do that when you come back from a long weekend. Tuesday, we'll do the written test on Chapter 6, first thing, so that'll be the first half hour or so. And then the rest of the period will be lab. And then Wednesday, so 2 weeks from yesterday, we will do the hands-on test for chapters 5 and 6. All right, which means that even though it'll be like on a Thursday, that Wednesday rather, that Thursday and Friday will go into Chapter 8. All right, and then the same kind of thing. The beginning of the next week will be a lab. You'll take the written test on 8, and then we'll go into 12. But by the end of that week, we should just about be done with the book. All right. We'll see where we are as far as the schedule. The whole last week of class, and now I've still got to do this, I have to set up accounts for each one of you on the Rankin server. All right. Plus, I would like to take one class period where, and I've never done this before, so it'll be interesting for me too, and it's either going to be really cool or it's really going to suck. And what I'd like to do is go out to GoDaddy or one of these places, get the domain name for that thing that you worked on for the midterm, and Andrew was the winner. So we're going to take his and see if we can actually port that stuff up to an actual website that's out there up and running. All right. I've asked my daughter to try to, give me updates. I know she's picked out her dress. You guys may or may not care. I had to show the other class. I know there's no females in here, but maybe you've heard of or seen that show on TV, that Say Yes to the Dress show. The guy was in St. Louis, and she bought one of his dresses. So I've got a picture of her with him, and they actually asked if they could have her on there because they were doing some special segment for Say Yes to the Dress St. Louis, and she said they could, but she didn't want them to show her face because she doesn't want everybody to see her dress. So you can hear her say yes to the, I'm saying yes to the dress, and you can see her back. All right. Now, again, this may not mean anything to you, but it's, it's like, I said, can I see it? No, you can't, Dad. I put down the $1,000 for the down payment for it, but I can't see it until October, which I think kind of sucks, but that's just the way it is. All right. So like I said, in an ideal world at least, we'll have at least a week to work on, for you to work on your portfolios. And we will talk about those before that last week. Yes?
I know we had Thanksgiving off. What was the day before or after that we got off?
You have the Friday after Thanksgiving off too. So next week you have Thursday off and Friday off.
Okay.
So it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4-day weekend. When you come back, I think literally it's we have 19 days. So you've got 5 days, 5 days, 5 days, and 4 days. Your last day is December 21st, which is a Thursday. And as far as I'm concerned, just so you know, all work is due by no later. That night I'm going to be grading whatever's left. And if you say the next day, well, I got it in, no, because the next day I have to be down to St. Louis at the St. Louis campus by 8 o'clock. All right? And after that, they usually let us go at 1, and I'm going back to Illinois right at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to have my grades in by the time I go to bed on Thursday night. All right? So, yes.
When do we get back from Christmas?
To my knowledge, your break starts on Friday, December 22nd. We resume classes on Monday, January 8th. So I don't know, that comes out to about 12 days or something like that you have off. I don't know exactly what it is. All right, maybe it's a little more than that for you guys. I think it's maybe 12 days for us. We've got to come back like the 3rd, I think it is, that Wednesday. I think that Wednesday we have to go to St. Louis. And then Thursday, we work here. Friday, in the past, they've given us the choice where we can either work here or work from home, which means you can come in here and find nobody, all right, when they give us our choice. But so that Monday, the 8th. And on that day, to my knowledge, it'll be in here, same time, all right? And if you're interested, I can show you the book. But the book that we're going to use then for is this one right here. Doesn't show all that well, but that literally is the book. It's a white colored book. It's called Microsoft Visual C# 2015, An Introduction to Object-Oriented Programming. All right. I already have it, but I've got to move some stuff around on the YouTube channel. I've already done about 50 lectures from that book, a bunch of them on the PowerPoints and a bunch where I do programs from every chapter. All right, so that stuff will be out there sometime during the break. It's a pretty good book. I don't know, Colin took the class last year. I don't know what you thought of the book, but I think it's, by and large, it's pretty well written. We will spend about 9 weeks on this book. We're going to go through the whole book. It'll be the same kind of thing. You will have a written test for every chapter. You'll have a hands-on test for about every 2 chapters. All right? And so for the last 7 weeks, we're going to go over databases. There are no books for that. I'm going to give you some online resources and some other resources, and you're going to learn how to work with databases, what databases are, etc. The idea behind that is then come fall of 2018, when you take the ASP.NET class, which is very highly database oriented, we don't have to go over again what databases are. We can review it, but it'll be relearning as opposed to learning. All right? Okay, so what I'd like all of you to do, please, right now, and I don't know how long we're going to spend on this. I don't want to bore anybody in here, But I think it's important to do this. Again, you may or may not agree, but I'd like you to go out to right there. So bring up a browser window. I'll give you a second, and please go out to right there. If you go out there and it looks like this, that's where you should be. All right? It says JavaScript, HTML, DOM. Now, I have not done this before, but my guess is if I came into Google here and I typed in DOM tutorial and hit enter, 16,400,000 results. Well, you can see the one that's on top, and there's other ones from there too. Is this tutorial unbelievably good? It's good. What I like about this tutorial is they take the time to go through virtually everything that you need to know to work with the DOM and JavaScript. And with many of these things that you go over in here, there are exercises. I'm not going to go over one exercise. My recommendation to you is that you take the time and at least look at them. All right? Because what you'll notice when you go over the exercises is they will literally show you what it is you're supposed to do and then encourage you to do something else. All right? The stuff that's on here on W3Schools, one of the reasons I like it so much is that they highly encourage you to use their code. All right? Now, I'm going to tell you this, and you might laugh. Believe me, this is not a joke. All right, years ago, Microsoft did the same thing. You could go out to Microsoft, and they would give you code samples, and they'd say, please use our code. And again, no joke. Most of the time, it didn't work. They would put stuff out there that had bugs. All right, and sometimes they'd update it, and sometimes they wouldn't. By and large, the stuff I've looked at on here seems to all work. All right, so here's an example of the DOM. You already know now DOM is Document Object Model. Now, if you look at this, it looks like the document object doesn't have a parent. You all know that it really does. That it doesn't go up that high, but if we went up one higher, it's the window object. All right, so this is stuff under a typical DOM. Now, when you look at it, it's not going to look like this. In fact, there is no real picture of the DOM. The DOM is just something that gets created for you based on your web document, all right, or your web page. So it's stuff that's on there for you. And again, we'll look at some of this stuff that's in here, but you'll notice that many things are elements, all right? And when you get down to the bottom, the things that are down there, these are typically called leaf nodes. They don't have any children. So if you've got a node, these are all nodes in here. Everything that's in here is a node. If you've got nodes that do not have children, they're referred to as leaf nodes. All right. And again, I don't want to read to you. This is the stuff that you can do. But if you look at it, virtually all of it goes back to you can create an interactive website. More than anything else. That's what it's about. All right. So what you'll learn in here, notice what they say. How to change content of elements, how to change style using CSS, how to react to DOM events. Remember, that's those event handlers yesterday. If you remember, what we had to do with those examples that I went over with you is we had to add event handlers. We had to tell the system either when the program loads, boom, run that function, or when the program is running and you click a button, run that function. Those are event handlers. So that's what they'll talk about in here. And how to add and delete HTML events. So again, with the interactivity, what you're able to do, as an example, is you could ask the user things on screen while they're on your website. And based on the answers that you give, you could change a lot of different things that are on the website. I've talked before about some simple examples, things like changing the background color, changing the text color, changing the font. But there's all sorts of things that you could conceivably do. All right? As an example. Okay? You know, one of the things I remember when I gave you the assignment for the midterm, I remember that I asked if you had any questions that you could either ask me or email me. And Tony emailed me and asked me about favorite sports teams that they had, favorite colors, etc. Okay? And I gave those to her, and I gave the answers as far as I could tell what they were. My daughter's a Packer fan and a Brewer fan, which is great because her fiance is a Cardinal fan. And it's great listening to those, that stuff. But the point is, if I was to go on to a website, let's just say it was a football website, and I was able to configure my screen, my Packers screen would look different than Tony's Patriots screen. And you could do that interactively by asking the person questions as they were on the site. All right? All right. So again, no desire in here to read to you. Here is the official definition for the DOM. But the point is, again, notice, dynamically access and update content. That's the big thing. I can't say that to you too many times. It says the DOM is actually separated into 3 parts: the core DOM, the XML DOM, and the HTML DOM. The one that we care about basically is the HTML DOM. All right, the core DOM would be for things that, if you were into this more, if we had a whole class on the DOM, we'd go into stuff like that. XML you may or may not have heard of, all right, but literally back in like the late 80s or something like that, that's when HTML was created, all right, and they had HTML1, HTML2, HTML3, HTML4, HTML 4.01, HTML 4.1. Then somebody came up with the idea, HTML sucks. So let's come up with a new language. And with a new language, we'll create our own tags. So they created this new language and they called it XML, the Extensible Markup Language. And it's still used by a lot of things. All right, you may have used it without even knowing it, but it never became as popular as people thought. And that's one of the reasons that they came back to HTML and said, hey, let's just try to fix HTML. So we care about the HTML DOM. And as you can see in here, the HTML DOM is a standard object model and programming interface. Elements are objects. What's an object? Anything in the world is an object. For example, each one of you is an example of a person object. Every one of you. Every one of you have properties. You all have an eye color. You all have a hair color. You all have a gender, a height, a weight. Those are properties. They're called attributes. They're called characteristics. It just depends. All right? We all have methods associated with us. We all eat. We all drink. We all sleep, etc. Now, we do it differently. We eat different things. We sleep different amounts. But you can see that we all have a commonality. All right? We all respond to certain events. All right? Ideally, by 8:05 every day, you respond to the Get Your Ass in Class event. All right? And you're here by 8:05. And I can tell when it's 8:54, you're all responding to I want to get the hell out of here event. All right? And it's worse in the afternoon. Yesterday, and you know Ethan, one of the second-year students, he's always the first one out the door. And he's a great guy. He's doing really well in the program and in the class. All right? But he's always at 4:22, he's there, and he's pressing up against the door. In fact, I even asked Ryan about him. I said, do you have problems with people doing that? And he goes, yeah, once. And I said, how'd you fix it? He said, well, I announced that whoever is standing by the door has got to hold it open for everybody else. And he said, then they stopped doing it. All right. So yesterday, as it turned out, he was the last one out of class. And I was just amazed because I was getting ready to leave and he was still in class. He said, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me. So, in other words, the HTML DOM is a standard for how to get, change, add, and delete HTML elements. That's it in a nutshell. That's what provides the interactivity right there. Now, if you notice, I have no idea what this is. This download now, I don't know if that's MobiRise or something else. But it says free Bootstrap website builder. If you want to download that, and if there's a way that you can use that, but still write some of your own Bootstrap for your portfolio, I don't care. I don't want this to be in Mobirise. If you decide come next spring that you want to change yours to Mobirise, you can do it. But you are going to be required for the first iteration of this to do it in pure Bootstrap. All right. So when you look on the side here, you know, they're going to go through a lot of different stuff in here. And I'm just showing you this. This is what we're going to go through right now. We're going to quickly look at everything that's in here. Each one of these is a screen. All right. We're also going to look here at the browser BOM. Why? Because then you can see the window object, the screen object, the location object, the history object, and the navigation object. Those are all ones that we talked about in Chapter 5. And on most of these pages, not on every one, but on most of these pages, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up having exercises down at the bottom, just so you know. All right? When you get down to the bottom of each page, you can click Next. You know, you can go to Previous, etc. All right, so there's where we were. I'm going to click Next. And now we're up to HTML DOM methods. All right. Again, methods are actions. They're also known as behaviors. Okay? Properties are values. They're also known as attributes or characteristics. You can set or change values. You know, as I have gone on, you know, as you get older, your height changes, your weight changes. All right? Not to be funny, but with some people, your gender changes. You know, there's all sorts of changes that can conceivably be made. All right? So as it says, the DOM can be accessed with JavaScript along with other languages. We're using JavaScript. In the DOM, again, all elements are objects. So everything that you put onto a web page is an object. The reason that's important is since everything that you put on a web page is an object, what that means is you can programmatically change any object on a web page. You can change an existing object, you can delete an existing object, you can create a new object. All right? And again, we already talked about what a property is and what a method is. All right. So, notice what it says here. This, if you look at this, and this is the stuff that has to start making sense to you. When we do this right here, there is nothing in that paragraph. It has an ID, but hopefully you'd all agree there is nothing there. All right? And notice it has an ID of demo. So we go in using JavaScript and we say, okay, using the GetElementByID on demo, change the inner HTML. In other words, change the paragraph text to Hello World. So in other words, this line that you see right there, that line right here, if we didn't do it programmatically, that's as though we came in here and we typed in Hello World. Does that make sense? All right. And again, you might say, well, it does make sense. Why the hell wouldn't you just put in Hello World to begin with? That's not the point, believe it or not. The point is, while the program is running, you can change what currently exists inside of your web page. That's what's important. If we knew all we wanted it to say was Hello World and never change, it would make a hell of a lot more sense to put it there. But we're talking about the idea, the dynamicity, being able to change something while the program is running. Now, it could be something as simple as we could come in here. In fact, let's try it yourself. Okay? Okay? So notice how it says that. No biggie right there, right? No biggie. Okay? So, but what's to stop us from coming in here and saying var name equal prompt, what is your name? Name. All right? Now, I'm going to say this. After I do that, I'm going to say it equals hello, but instead of hello world, I'm going to say hello plus name. All right? Do you all understand what I'm doing right there? I'm going in and I'm going to ask you, and I got better close that here. if this works, I haven't tried it before, but it should come up with a dialog box that says, what is your name? I'm going to type in Jeff. So ideally, if this works, what's going to happen is that paragraph will now contain hello, Jeff. All right? And that's to try to show you some of the dynamicity. Because if it was just hello world, it wouldn't mean much. But I can run it once. There it is. All right? I can run it again, and I don't have to use my name. Okay? So you start to see that while the program is running, all right, you can have your web page respond to what the user has inputted. All right? And again, I mentioned this to you before, but just so you know, as you start going through this, there will be exercises, not yet, but we will see them fairly quickly. All right. Now, you've already heard about the GetElementByID method. We're going to use that a lot next week when we start doing form validation. What the GetElementByID method is used, I mean, it's used for a lot of different things, but the way we're going to start using it next week is after we go through the form chapter, all right, is we're going to start going back to HTML forms. But now we want to manipulate those forms by grabbing whatever is in that text box, whatever we put in there, and using the GetElementByID to go and copy the result of that to what? To some kind of a JavaScript variable. So we're able to manipulate the program. All right? And we talked about the inner HTML property also already. You just saw it in here. All right? All right. The document object. This is all stuff we had in the last chapter. The document object represents your web page. You have to understand these three methods. The one you're going to use probably more than half the time is going to be GetElementByID. Anything that you may conceivably want to manipulate programmatically, you'll want to give an ID to. Does that make sense? And remember, on each web page, IDs have to be unique. We talked about that back in the CSS part of the class. All right. On the other hand, if you want to be able to manipulate a lot of stuff at once, you can use the by tag name or the by class name. Remember the difference between these two. By tag name. So if I wanted to be able to grab every single paragraph, I'd use the paragraph tag. And I'd use the GetElementsByTag name. If I had something where on the same page I was using the class, and then maybe I set up a paragraph that had a certain class, and I use that same class on an unordered list, and I use that same class on something else, then I could use GetElementsByClassName. All right. And they go through here, and they mention how you can use the inner HTML. We've talked about that. Notice there's a set attribute, so there's a bunch of ways that you can do this. And they start showing you in here how you can add elements and how you can delete elements. You heard this shtick already, but remember, when you do a create element, it creates a new node for you. It does not add it to the document object model. After you create it, you have to use either the append child or the insert before to put it someplace in the actual DOM itself. All right, and again, I know you've heard a lot of this stuff before. All right, here is an example. Adding an event handler to an on-click event. And there's different ways that you can do this, okay? And they've got all sorts of examples in here. These are different things that you can work with the document object. I'm not going to run through those. You'll notice that one of these, this has been deprecated in HTML5. All right, there's another one in here that says it's obsolete, but virtually everything else in there is still being used. All right. So there's examples here. Find HTML element by ID. Okay, so again, you've seen this. var myElement equals document.getElementByID intro. Well, what's that? That's this, right? Document.getElementByID inner HTML equals the text for the intro paragraph is, and that's this. You should be able to take a look at what is there And ideally, at least, that should make sense to you. And again, if it doesn't, I'd suggest that you take an hour or two and go over this, because you're going to be blasted with this on your next test. I'm going to expect that you either know this because you just get it, or you know this because you went over this or something else. There are other things too. All right, Code School has got some, I think they've got an more interactive one than this, so there's other ones that you can go to and go through as well. But if you notice right here, you'll notice here we've got the document.getElementByID on the right-hand side of an equal sign, which means you are taking that and assigning it to a JavaScript variable. Here, you've got the document.getElementByID on the left-hand side of an equal sign. So here, you are grabbing and copying that value to something else. Here, you are setting that value. If it's on the right-hand side, it's like doing this. Var age equal 21. Well, what's on the right-hand side? What am I doing? I'm setting age, right? That's what I'm doing there. But if I come over here and I say alert, age is plus age, and it comes back and it says age is 21. So here I am setting the value of age. Here I am displaying the value of age. This is called a set or a setter. This is called a get or a getter. All right, and you can do either of those with this. Here's an example of using it by tag name. And notice again, once you do that, when you do this and you say get elements by tag name, just so you know, it returns what's called a collection, an HTML collection. It's not an array, but you can use a lot of array-like stuff with it. Not only that, notice how we're looking at this. We're saying x0.innerHTML. That says, out of these three paragraphs, show me the text of the first paragraph. And you'll notice that if I come in here and I change this to index 2 here and to index 2 here, that should come back and say what? 0, 1, 2. That should come back and say, this example demonstrates the get elements by tag name. All right, now it shouldn't say the first paragraph anymore. It should say the third paragraph. And if I run it, you can see that it does. All right. This is all stuff that has to click with you. All right. And again, much the same. Then there's an example of finding stuff by class name. And you'll notice in here, we've got class equal intro for this paragraph and for this paragraph. All right. And then when we grab that, if we do it by class name, it's going to grab these two, but it's not going to grab this one because there is no class equal intro. It's not going to grab this one because there's not any class equals intro. But if I came through here and I put in this, all right, and now I say it equals document.getElements by class name. All right, and now what should happen when I run this is, notice what's in here now. All right, so they don't have to all be the same type of element. So when you do get element by tag name, they do have to be the same kind of element. All the paragraphs, all the unordered lists. But if I want to be able to grab a bunch of stuff on the page where they're not all the same type of thing, but they all have the same class, then I use the get elements by class name. So hopefully you understand the difference between get element by ID, get elements by tag name and get elements by class name. All right. You can also use selector. All right. So again, notice that is a selector all. Remember the difference. Query selector only returns the first thing it finds that meets the criteria. Query selector all returns all of them. All right. So literally what we have in here is query selector all p.intro, which means show me all paragraphs with a class of intro. P for paragraph, dot for class, intro for the name. So that would return those two. So we got the first paragraph, but again, we could come in here if we wanted to and change that to the second paragraph, which would be a 1 here and would be a 1 here. All right. And they've got a thing in here. It says that you can go through this. What this is showing in here, all right, is again, you can use some of this stuff like their arrays. All right. Okay, so there's a bunch of other stuff. And here's where I mentioned this to you. I'm not going to go through any of these, but test yourself with exercises. They give you an exercise, and there's hints in there. They will even show you the answer if you can't figure it out. All right, but it's probably within your in your best interest to go through and look at some of that. Here they come in and talk about changing HTML content. We already looked at this. All right, using inner HTML. So that's going to find P1, which currently has hello world, and it should replace it with new text. And there it is. Now we could set that up. Right now we don't have any event listeners, so boom, it just changes right away. But we could set it up so that it had a button, and you have to click the button, and then it would change the text. All right. Again, we've gone over a lot of this already, and there are exercises. All right. Here, this is a little different. Again, this is talking about changing CSS. What does this mean? This is saying, okay, someplace in here, I've got something with an ID of P2, and you can see it's right here. We want to make sure that when we run this, that the paragraph is blue. All right, so again, you'll see that if you run this, pretty easy to tell what happened. All right, and again, as I mentioned before, since there are no or is no, all right, there's no kind of event listener in here, it's just going to happen as soon as you run the program. And again, here's some events then. Here we're saying on click. So there's a button there. What should happen is when we click, the thing with an ID of ID1 should turn red. So when we run this, you'll notice it's not red, but when we click it, it is red. All right, you could even write code to toggle it that said if it was red, make it black, else make it red. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of different ways that you could do this. And I've given examples like this, but I want to say it again. For example, let's pretend for a second this was some kind of an accounting page, all right, for some kind of an accounting company. And if something was negative, you might want it to be red to show that you're not in the black, you're in the red. All right, that kind of an idea. And again, more examples. And also see it says for the DOM style properties, look at, I'm not going to click there, but it brings you off to yet another link that's right there. All right. Then they get into animation. Now, we didn't go into animation in our book, but it's kind of cool, some of the stuff that they do. They draw this, and it's not doing anything yet. It's not animated. Sorry. But they just have a red box inside of a yellow box. But you'll notice that if we keep going on with this, creating the animation using JavaScript, and we run this, and we run this one, watch how it changes when you click me. Now, is that cool? No. But the idea is, well, look what it shows. We've got a set interval and a clear interval, which is saying, the set interval is saying basically we want this to move every 5 milliseconds or whatever it is, And once we get to where it's in a certain position, remove that. If you didn't remove it, it would attempt to keep going. And keep going, and keep going. All right? So this is very crude animation, but it's animation nevertheless. All right? And maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't. You go out to a lot of websites where that's what they have is pretty crude animation. There used to be something, you may or may not have heard of this, you may or may not care, but, and I'm not making this up either, there used to be something that was called a blink attribute, where your text would literally blink, and every browser supported it. All right? And then after a while, I think it was just IE that supported it. I think you can still do it, but you've got to do it programmatically. What was happening is people were making text blink and whatever, and people who had, that were schizophrenic and had other types of mental disorders, it was driving them nuts to see stuff blink. They just, and that's one of the reasons they got rid of it. That's what I read, at least. All right. So here's some DOM events. Notice this. Notice what happens when I take the mouse and put it where it says mouse over me. It should be pretty obvious. So notice that's a mouse over, there's a mouse out. Mouse over, mouse out. Notice when I come here and I mouse over, nothing happens. But when I click here, all right, click me again. Okay? All that should be pretty obvious what's going on. As it says, it's reacting to different events. So when we look at this, it says click on this text. All right, now that's kind of a stupid example, but you can see when you do it exactly what happens. So on the on click, you change the text for the H1, all right? Notice when you click it again, nothing happens. We haven't put any code in there to make that happen. This literally is running, all right, the code right inside of the H1 event itself, or the H1 element itself. Here's another example. All right, click on this text. This time they do it with an actual JavaScript function. It looks the same. That's actually considered a much cleaner way of doing it, because typically what you do, and you heard this already, we would take this file right here, that file, and we would grab these script tags out of it, but we would grab this stuff, put it in an external.js file, and then reference the file in here with script tags. Because then you've got what's called your separation of concerns. That's the way it's recommended that you do it. Again, assign an on-click attribute to a button element. All right? So what's happening? You click here, you can see exactly what happens. Notice it's 851.09. I click again, it's now 851.13, etc. So it is updating in real time. All right? Again, some of that interactivity that we talked about before. And not very much code. The onload and unload events. With the onload, what you're saying is, hey, when your window loads, when it gets put into memory, run this. So if you want something to run as soon as you start it up, you'd put it in the load or onload event. There is an OnChange event that you can use with a lot of different kinds of fields. Notice here I'm going to type in my name. All right, I put it all in lowercase. As soon as I got out of there, I didn't do that. It converted it to uppercase. Now, that may not seem important, but there are certain operating systems and certain software packages where if I put in my name and I put it in like this, and then later I put it in like this, and then later I put it in like this, that's considered three different things. But if I were to run something like this where I would do a two upper, they would all look like the second one. That can be important. All right, again, depending on the software, etc., that you're using. And again, there's a mouse over example. It's the same one we just looked at. So notice mouse over and mouse out. So on mouse over, you're calling the M over. On mouse out, you're calling the M out. There's also a mouse down and a mouse up, so click me. Now it's when I click, notice how I'm holding down on this. That's why it says release me. When I let go, it says thank you. So now we've got code in mouse down and in mouse up. So there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize this stuff. Again, they give you some other examples. You know what focus is. All right, we've already looked at it. And again, they've got references, they've got exercises. All right. Next, as we peruse our way down here, are event listeners. Notice how you can add an event listener right there. We haven't done this. Our book doesn't even show this. But this is adding the event listener right in the line of code itself, as opposed to the way that we did it in class. Again, as always, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. This example uses the AddEventListener to attach a click event to a button. So when you click, all right, you saw that before. Okay. Then they show how you can add it to any kind of element. Now, this is considered bad practice. Somebody tell me, why is that considered? So let's take a look at it, at the example. All right. If you put it in like this, it's okay. That's okay. But if you put it in and you actually, if you know what you're doing, you can literally put it in like in here. You shouldn't do that. Don't put JavaScript. All right. There really shouldn't ever be a reason to put JavaScript directly into your HTML. All right. And again, they're showing this all in the same file for simplicity. But this stuff that's in here, that should be in its own external file. You have been asked to do that. You will be expected to do that on your next test. All right. Yes.
Even if it's just like one line.
It depends. If it's something that's simple and it's not something programmatic, in other words, it's something you want it to like run and done, then I can see it. But typically, if it's something that's going to be run and done, a good question is, why the hell did you have to do that to begin with? So again, it's a generic question. There's not a right answer for it. All right. You can add many event handlers to the same event. So notice hello world, the function executed. All right. We could have even put it down here so we had the date and time, etc. This is adding it to the window object. You've seen this. This is what we did. All right, we did this in the examples that we went over yesterday in the first example. All right, and we've got it. No, so notice it says this example uses this on the window object. Try resizing the browser window to trigger this. So see what it's doing right there? It's just giving us a different random number as we move our way along here. That's all. It's kind of a dumb example. One of the examples that they have on, I don't remember if it's one you've done or you're going to do, what you have to do is, as you resize your window, it shows you the window coordinates. All right, that's something that actually could be useful. All right, this thing right here is kind of important. Event bubbling or event capturing. All right, and there is a question about bubbling in the next chapter. It's a crummy question, but at least you've seen it. It says, in bubbling, the innermost element is handled first. So imagine you had this. I'm just going to try to make this simple. It's almost break time. But let's say I have function 1, and function 1 calls function 2. All right? And function 2 calls function 3. And function 3 calls function 4. Function 4 calls function 5. And in function 5, there's some stuff in there. I don't know what it is. I don't care. All right? But I'm in function 5, and now my program blows up. If you use bubbling, it looks to see, did you handle the error in here? So it looks right at the source. If it doesn't find it, it goes here. 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 If it doesn't find it, you're screwed. All right? That's called bubbling because it bubbles its way up. All right. There's also event capturing, which goes in the other direction. So if it finds an error here, it starts at the top looking and it works its way down. So capturing goes from top to bottom, bubbling goes from bottom to top. And if you remember that, that's pretty much what you need to understand. And with a lot of that stuff, people are like, well, how am I going to use this? And it's not so much that you even have to use it, because much of it is provided for you, but it's just so that you can understand behind the scenes what's happening. So they've got examples of that in here. All right. Not only can you add event listeners, you can remove them if you want to or need to. Let's do these last 4 pages here. So, DOM navigation, DOM nodes. According to the W3C, again, everything is a node. You've already seen that. Node relationships, we've talked about those already. Root is a child of document, element. These 2 elements are children of root. They're grandchildren of this. You typically don't do it any more than that. Some books go nuts and it says, oh, we've got this here and this here. They're siblings. Yeah, that's okay. You've got this here and you've got that, etc. And they talk about nieces and nephews. That's ridiculous. All right, but some books do go to that, and they give you a whole family tree based on this. All right, it says node relationships in here. In a node tree, the top node is the root. Every node has just one parent. That's an important thing. It's not, you don't have what's called multiple inheritance. The reason that is important is some programming languages allow that. Almost everyone does not. You can only have one parent. All right. A node can have any number of children. All right, and all the children have the same parent. And they give you some examples about that. All right. In fact, I think this is important enough. Let's just stop right here. It's 9. Let's come back at 10 after 9. All right, we'll pick it up there.